Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to paint watercolor marigold. Marigold are one of the birth month flowers for the month of October, and I cannot wait to show you how to paint this beautiful flower. For this project you will need a piece of watercolor paper. This is LARGE 140 pound cold press paper. I'm also using round brushes. I have a size 4 and a size 10 round brush, and I'm using my limited palette of colors including cad yellow, magenta, cerulean, indigo, and sap green. Alright, so to get started with marigold, we are going to use our size 4 round brush, and we are going to mix up a warm yellow color. If you look at marigolds, they can feel really complicated because there are a lot of petals, but we'll use white space to our advantage with this flower. We're going to use almost pure cad yellow. I did mix it a tiny bit with some magenta that was on my palette, but only slightly. A few short lines for the center, little rectangles and squares is what we want to think about. And then as we come out from the center, we are painting squares, rectangular shapes tucked in underneath the shapes that we painted before. As we come out, I start filling out the bottom shape to get a better idea of how it looks around the bottom before I go around the back, especially if I'm seeing this flower from the side. I'm utilizing white space by making sure there is a gap between my flower petals so that this is not one big yellow blob, and you can see the difference between some of the petals. So a lot of these shapes, especially as we get farther out, are more rectangular, but we're still keeping the geometric feel of the petals as they are kind of tucked in. And you can see I'm getting longer down here in the front as the petals are getting bigger, because I'm trying to establish how the shape of the flower is. And then as I come around the back or the top of the flower here on the paper, I am going to do smaller shapes to make it look like this part of the flower is pointed away from us so that it has the right perspective, because it doesn't seem to be fully pointed toward us. So we're going to paint this yellow base first. For all of our flowers, this one's going to be a slightly smaller one, and you can see I'm a little bit more loose and flowing with this one over here on the top. You can make this as loose or detailed as you want with a marigold. So once you have the smaller flower, you can even do a little bit of a bud, just a few petals for more of a bud for the marigold. We want all of our yellow color to completely dry, and so we're going to let that dry before we move on to any more details that make it look like a marigold with some of the orange-red details within the petals. We don't want any blending, so that needs to fully dry. So we're going to move on to the greenery. This is cad yellow mixed with a little bit of indigo to get a nice deep green that still feels very warm, and we're going to do some thicker bases to our marigolds and some quick easy strokes for some of the greenery around the bud, using the tip of our size 10 round brush to create simple stems. The reason I have moved to my size 10 round brush for the greenery is because it holds a lot more pigment and water, and I can make these bigger areas of greenery without running out of pigment. So as I'm placing these leaves, I can push down on the body of my brush to get some interesting shapes without running out of pigment and water. And so I like to use my size 10 round brush even for the stems. Just use the very tip and light pressure for the stems, and then transfer the pressure into the body of the brush when you start creating the leaves. So I'm looking for ways to balance the painting by adding leaves that are coming around some of my flowers. Like here, I'm kind of tucking the leaf behind this main flower and then making the one on the left stand farther out so it feels like everything is a bit balanced. While my greenery is still wet, I'm adding more indigo into my green mixture so that I can tap in some shadows and some interesting colors to get a wet into wet bleed with this darker color, and it creates a lot of interest and dimension within the leaves. Some of my lines are a little bit hard as everything has started to dry, but I'm still getting a very subtle blend And I think that's quite nice to have some areas that are harder and some areas that blend a bit more. And I'm tapping this in very specific places. I've determined my light source is coming from the right, so I'm trying to make sure most of my shadowy color that I'm tapping into my greenery is on the left. But really it can be a bit random as well. You're just trying to add some dimension within the greenery. Now that our flower petals have completely dried, we're going to focus on the red section of the petals. Now, if you look at pictures of marigolds, this marigold style where there is a mostly red petal with a outline of yellow on the edge, that's what we're trying to achieve. So to get that yellow outline, we had to start with a base of yellow petal. Now we can fill in most of the petal with this red color. So this is cad yellow with a bit of magenta, which will give us a nice deep red. And we're placing this color on the part of the petal that's going down into the flower and then leaving the outer edge of the petal yellow. So I'm being careful to place this on each of the rectangle square shapes of yellow that I've already placed for my petals, leaving the edges open with yellow. If you ever feel like the line is too hard or the color is too intense, place your color, tap your brush a bit, and move some of that pigment around. But this is a nice moment where we can use a hard line to our advantage because we don't necessarily need it to be soft and blended. We want a stark line between the reddish color and the yellow edge on the inside of the petal. Now, if I add a little bit more magenta into my mixture, I can get a deeper color. So I felt like this red was a little bit dull, so adding a bit more magenta, making it lean more into the pink color, I'm adding a quick swipe of this color as the petals, again, are going deep into the flower, and that just adds a bit more dimension, almost like shadow, as it goes farther in. Then I'm going to add a few bits of this color to the bud and also to this smaller flower that we have here on the top. The most important thing to remember is that the upper edge of wherever your petals are just needs to stay yellow. As our red magenta color dries, we can add a touch of indigo into our magenta mixture, just a touch, to give it a deeper, more purpley hue, and that will allow us to create even more shadow and depth within this red color. Because the red color is at the base of the petal as it's going down into the flower, we're not only establishing the color of the petal, but also the shadow as it's going down into the flower. And so as we add bits of indigo into our magenta, mix all of that together to get a nice deep purple, we can add this color just at the base. And you can see that when I'm adding this deeper, darker contrasting color, I'm adding it very minimally. Most of the time I'm placing it almost like a little dot. So once you get to your deeper contrasting colors, you don't need to focus on covering larger areas. We've already done that with the yellow as the base, the red as the establishing color, and then a bit of that contrast, and then just add it to all of the petals for all of your flowers. Then I'm writing October and marigold, since I am painting the marigolds as a birth month flower project, but there is never a wrong time to paint marigolds. Thank you so much for watching this painting. I hope you enjoyed. Please let me know if you have any questions below, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys.